Hello, I am Josh with Coastwatch, and this is your weekend weather report for the southeast Queensland, northeast New South Wales coastline this weekend as we head in towards Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the 12th, 13th, and 14th of December, respectively. It's going to be another good weekend, relatively storm free until the later parts of Sunday. It's similar to last weekend where those storms come in later on the weekend to rein in our plans, but we've got a massive high pressure system into the Tasman Sea. It's not overly strong with a pressure of 1,023 millibars tomorrow afternoon, but it is very large indeed, and it's got some pretty significant influence on the Queensland situation, particularly through southeast Queensland. It means we're going to be seeing an onshore breeze and slightly elevated swell through southeast Queensland and northeastern New South Wales this weekend, which is picking up right now as I record this on Thursday afternoon, but it's going to become a little bit more apparent on Friday night into Saturday and then into early Sunday before those storms push in from the west and rain in our nice weather this weekend. So let's start things off with what we're going to be looking at Friday afternoon. Overall, it looks to be a pretty good setup. We've got some strongish gusts coming out of the east. Winds are expected to be around 10 to 15 knots, gusting to about 20 or even 25 knots onto the Fraser Coast and the Sunshine Coast. So evening boating may be a little bit unpleasant, definitely a little bit choppy, that's for sure. And our waves do start to come up as well on Friday evening. You can see significant wave heights here at seas out into the Pacific Ocean between 1.5 to 2 meters, about 5 feet or so. We're expecting these waves to pick up a little bit further on Friday night into Saturday morning before dropping back a little bit onto early Saturday morning when they will drop back to about a metre or so, particularly around the Gold Coast into the Moreton Bay area. Waves should drop off a little bit, but for the Fraser Coast, still holding strong at about 1.5 metres on Saturday morning. But Saturday, we will be starting off the day with winds of around 5 to 10 knots in the morning along the coast, increasing to about 15 knots in the early afternoon, then dropping back to about 10 knots into the evening. Gusts throughout the day between 10 to 15 knots out of the east, increasing briefly to about 20 knots around lunchtime. And you can see those wind gusts are just not expected to get too strong, but it will be enough to cause a little bit of chop around southeast Queensland and probably create some unpleasant surfing conditions, for example, particularly down onto the Gold Coast, where our swell is actually decent for the first time in a while for some reasonable surf. You can see on Saturday mornings our swell heights start to rise to about 1.3, 1.4 meters or so. A short period of about 8 seconds, not overly ideal for surfing, but that's really getting reined in by those easterly winds, which will make these waves quite difficult to catch. As we continue to push this out, you can see our swell remains at about that 1 to 1.5 meter mark, dropping back a little bit on Saturday, and you can see Saturday night we are going to be talking about some more pleasant boating conditions through southeast Queensland, and this is where we're expecting our winds to then change around to the north. We'll be seeing these winds here go from the easterlies as that high pressure ridge was holding firm in the Tasman Sea through Friday and early Saturday before it moves over New Zealand, and then these winds swing around to the northeast on Saturday afternoon and then into the north on Saturday night into early Sunday morning. And this means that we are going to see an uptick in wind gusts, but not necessarily in sustained winds. And this will also be ahead of a thunderstorm outbreak, which could potentially be severe on Sunday afternoon and evening through pockets of southeastern Queensland. I'll talk about that in just a few moments. But as we wake up on Sunday, you can see winds are expected to be quite fresh out of the north for a few spots, 11 to 15 knots or 10 to 15 knots through the early morning hours offshore from the Gold Coast, a little bit calmer up into the Fraser Coast and the Capricornia coastline, for example. Winds barely above 10 knots there, but those gusts do start to pick up a little bit for coastal locations around the Gold Coast, pushing 20, even getting close to 25 knots into the northeast of New South Wales, and south of Coffs Harbour these wind gusts approach 30 knots in 1 or 2 locations. So it is going to be quite gusty, and these northeasterly winds as well will cause some significant chop in the waters across southeastern Queensland and northeastern New South Wales. It's not overly ideal for boating, but it's not going to be nasty enough as to where you should cancel your plans, for example. But if you prefer that calmer weather, rethink your boating on Sunday. Definitely going to be a little bit of chop around, but still rather pleasant out there, particularly in the more protected waters, the Gold Coast canals, and then into the Moreton Bay area. The chop shouldn't be too much of a problem in there. Flicking things over to our rainfall forecast, though, you can see that rainfall and shower and thunderstorm activity begins to build along the Brisbane coast and into the Wivenhoe outlook after about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We'll also see potentially severe thunderstorm activity developing around the border ranges and into the scenic rim, and some severe thunderstorm activity could develop as far towards the coast as the Gold Coast or the Gold Coast hinterland, and some significant thunderstorm activity is also a weak possibility into the northeast New South Wales coastline as well. Now, severe thunderstorms will cause some substantially stronger wind gusts compared to what the forecast is suggesting. Localized wind gusts up to 40 knots are possible with severe thunderstorms. So after 2 or 3 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, make sure you are monitoring the radar closely and heeding all weather warnings as they do roll in. Sunday is definitely not a high-end severe thunderstorm day for southeastern Queensland, but a couple of these thunderstorms, particularly into the later afternoon and evening hours, if they do track towards the coast, could cause some significant wind gusts, with our highest risk times being between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. Around the Gold Coast area. Brisbane should be spared the worst of these thunderstorms, but make sure you do keep checking in on the forecast and keep monitoring the radar imagery as well. When severe thunderstorms tend to ramp up through southeast Queensland, we see a lot of these northeasterly winds and northerly winds begin to pour in as well, and that will keep those wind gusts fresh to gusty through Sunday night or Sunday afternoon into Sunday night, and these wind gusts could be approaching 30 knots at times around the Gold Coast and into the Fraser Coast on Sunday afternoon after about 4 or 5 o'clock, regardless of the movement of potentially severe thunderstorms. Those winds definitely will be getting up there. Then it calms off a little bit Sunday or late night on Sunday, and then as we head in towards next working week, we're looking at another potentially severe thunderstorm outbreak on Monday, and a southeasterly change comes in Monday evening into early Tuesday morning, and that's going to turn our winds away from the northeast into the southeast, and some fresh to strong gusts can be expected as we get out towards Monday and Tuesday. And you can see that here on our forecast modelling here, gusts approaching 40 knots on a Tuesday, so make sure you do keep this in the back of your head that Monday and Tuesday could get quite windy and quite nasty for boating in a few spots through southeastern Queensland. This is a look at the Coastwatch website, our Gold Coast Waters Cape Morton to Point Danger forecast. You can head over to the Coastwatch website at coastwatch.com.au. There is a link in the description. You can get access to the 4-day weather chart from the Bureau of Meteorology. Very handy for at-a-glance weather forecasting here. And you can see we've got it all the way out towards Monday now. We've got our forecast for Friday and Saturday as well. Not quite at the time of recording our forecast for Sunday yet, but you can see we've got a brief rundown of all of the conditions that we're going to be looking at this weekend, or on Friday and Saturday, I should say. And you can also head over to the weather forecast and go over to the tides and moon page as well and check out the tides around the southeast Queensland, northeast New South Wales coastline. And if it does interest you anywhere else around Queensland as well, you can have a look at our tide forecast. Now, this weekend, we're going to be looking at an initial high tide, our first high tide being in the early morning hours between 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock. And then we're going to be having a low tide at about 10 o'clock-ish. We're going to see our bigger high tide in the mid-afternoon to late afternoon hours around 4 or 5 o'clock. And then our second low tide is going to be later on into the night at around 10 or 11 p.m. Now, that is going to do it for our weekend weather forecast. If you have enjoyed this brief overview of what we're expecting through southeast Queensland and northeast New South Wales, make sure you leave a like on the video as well. Share it around and also follow the Coastwatch page for more forecasts and more boating and marine-based content like this. And remember, don't destroy what you've come to enjoy. Check out the Coastwatch website for more information. We'll see you soon. Goodbye.